Yeah, but good evening and welcome to the discussion on the impact of the US election on Ukraine's security and the EU enlargement. Thank you for joining us here at the ADM as well as online. My name is Malvina Talik and I will guide you through today's evening. We are honored that we organized this event with two distinguished cooperation partners, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine and Embassy of Ukraine in Vienna. And before we delve into the discussion, before I introduce our experts, let me pass the floor to the chairman of the IDM, Mr. Friedrich Faulhammer, who is joining us live from Washington, D.C.
So, yes, thank you very much. Good evening, dear Malvina, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe, so the IDM, to this event, to this discussion, very close to yesterday's US elections. I'm currently, as already mentioned, here in DC, in the World Bank building, where we have also discussions about the first observations with regard to the result of the election here in the US. And maybe I can state two things which will be relevant or will be a support for your further discussion. On the one hand, the result was a surprise for many of us, even here in the US. On the one hand, that Donald Trump won the race, and on the other hand, how he maybe will have won this race, because the result is a very strong result for Donald Trump. And I think this was in that way not expected from anybody, that it will be maybe such a strong result. The second observation is that the people here in Washington, D.C. are quite happy, not because of the outcome, not because Donald Trump maybe was elected, but of the situation that nobody has to have the fear that there will be violence of Trumpists. This was the main concern in the last days here in Washington, D.C. What will happen if Donald Trump will not win the race? And therefore, there is a great relief about that. But still, there is a lot of concern what will happen in this new period of US president, when then Donald Trump will take over, will be inaugurated, when, as we see, the Senate will be dominated by the Republicans, and what also can happen, that the Congress will also be in the hand of Republicans. So really exciting times ahead of us. I would like to thank the organizers and our partners for planning this conference, this discussion. I want to thank all panelists and the participants, and I wish you a very interesting debate with best greetings from Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those first-hand observations from the US. And now, let me pass the floor and invite to the stage Mr. Olksandr Irkhin, Minister-Counsellor at the Embassy of Ukraine.
Dear Chairman Faulhammer, dear Director Schäfer, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Institute of the Danube region and Central Europe, for organizing this event, for inviting me here, for arranging this timely discussion just the next day after the presidential elections in the United States. And in general, thank you for cooperation, fruitful cooperation with the Embassy of Ukraine, with the Verkhovna Rada. We are ready to continue it and to arrange further events. It's a privilege for me to be here on this opening and giving these opening remarks. Keeping Ukraine high on the agenda, on the international agenda, including on the platform of the Institute for Danube region, is crucial for mobilizing international support for Ukraine in these difficult times when Ukraine fighting the unprovoked and illegal Russian aggression. It will be 1,000 days in less than 2 weeks' time, on 19th of November, that Ukraine has been defending not only its freedom and sovereignty, but also the common values and principles democratic world is based. The US, together with the European Union, its two major pillars, which could be considered as guarantors of rule-based international order established after the Second World War. And it is obvious for everyone that the developments in the United States have a direct influence on the global scale, not talking about Europe or Ukraine in particular. Today we all witness the impressive victory of the President Trump. The choice of the President of the United States is, of course, the choice of the American people. President Zelensky already congratulated President Trump with his victory. In his tweet, President Zelensky recalled the meeting with President Trump back in September this year, when they had a productive and frank meeting and discussed in detail Ukraine-US strategic partnership, the victory plan, and the ways to put an end to Russian aggression. With regard to the security impact of this election in the US, I would like to underline that the United States is #1 partner in to Ukraine in counter Russian aggression. And we hope that the new administration in the United States support will continue. We enjoyed over the recent years strong bipartisan support for Ukraine in the United States. And I would say that support of Ukraine is one of the topics that unite, not divide, Democrats and Republicans. Ukraine victory over Russian aggression is in the interest of the United States and the entire Euro-Atlantic community. It's critical to the security and prosperity, not only of Ukraine itself, but also for Europe and the United States. Our victory will be our joint victory. The support provided to Ukraine is not an act of charity, but the best US security investment in global stability for decades to come. We hope that this support will continue until the new president of the United States. Only together with the United States, the free democratic world based on international law and UN Charter can be protected. Today, we are all witnessing how the Russia-led excess of evil makes all effort to undermine and ruin the democratic world. The recent bright example is the deployment by Russia of North Korean troops on the battlefield with Ukraine. The key instruments for our victory and for restoring peace is the peace formula presented by the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the victory plan presented by him. In September, President of Ukraine presented the victory plan in the US to the current US leadership and to the both at that time candidates, including Danube and Kamala Harris. I would say that the logic of the victory plan that can put an end to Russian aggression coincides with the peace restraints approach of President Trump. This is exactly the principle that can practically bring closer, lasting, and just peace in Ukraine. So we hope that together with the new US administration and other partners, we will be able to put this plan into action. Ukraine's army now is among the strongest in Europe. And after our victory, Ukraine can provide its input to ensuring long-term peace and security in Europe. In the post-war period, Ukraine could even replace certain US military units stationed in Europe. Ukraine with its army would also be an invaluable asset to NATO. These are just the small parts of the victory plan. With regard to the EU enlargement visas, which is another topic of our discussion today, the impact of the US election is not that obvious at the moment. Accession to the EU is among Ukraine's top priority, both in terms of our foreign policy and in terms of internal reforms. And it will continue to be so regardless of who won the election in the United States. We hope that the EU approach to the enlargement will not change either with the election of the new president. At the moment, Ukraine is in the phase of the bilateral screening with regard to pre-accession negotiations. We are now presenting our progress in reforms and implementing EU acquis to the European Commission, and we are working on the several roadmaps, which should be a prerequisite for us to open the negotiations on Cluster 1. We hope to be able to do so already in the early next year. Even through the war, Ukraine is capable to implement comprehensive and sometimes painful reforms based on the EU rules and standards. And this is a unique experience, not only for Ukraine, but for EU enlargement policy itself. And we hope that this enlargement policy will continue to be based on the merit-based approach and not politicized process. Ukraine's accession to the EU will make Europe stronger, more secure, and more prosperous. And this is in the interest of all of us, Ukraine, the EU, and the United States. To summarize, we are still to see what kind of changes the elections in the US will bring for Europe and its security. I believe, and I'm confident that the crucial thing is to preserve the transatlantic unity and solidarity. It will help us to protect the world order based on international law. Otherwise, the evil forces could be one step closer to celebrating their victory. And as regards Ukraine's own priorities, they will not change with the change of the US administration. Our victory over aggressor and the EU accession are on top of our priority lists. Once again, thanks to organizer for organizing such a timely discussions. I wish everybody insightful and inspiring discussions and new ideas. Thank you very much.
Very much for this opening remarks. We'll be discussing many themes and issues that you mentioned in your opening speech. Let me now introduce our expert panel. We are very happy to have two experts from Ukraine with us. Olena Kilko, a researcher at the Comenius University in Bratislava, who is with us here, as well as Dmytro Starodub, who is joining us online, and who is chief scientific consultant at the Economic Development and Financial Policy Department at the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. We have also with us Andreas Umland, who is analyst at Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. And last but not least, to my right, Sebastian Schäfer, director of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe. So when I was preparing moderation for this discussion, I was looking at the polls, which were saying that it will be such a close contest that we won't have a result today. So I was quite surprised this morning when I discovered that we have a winner. It's official. Donald Trump will be the next president of the US. Another question is, what does it mean for Ukraine? In the opening remarks, we heard that we still cannot assess the impact. Nevertheless, I would like to ask the first question at our audience here, as well as online. What do you think? Who thinks that the victory of Donald Trump is good news for Ukraine? Please raise your hand or write it in the chat. You can be brave. Okay, I don't see any.
Potentially.
Okay, potentially. One hand was raised here in the room. I don't see any responses from the chat. Who believes that it's bad news for Ukraine? I see many more hands. Who decided not to vote?
I haven't raised hand to any of the questions, but I think that the question was which Ukraine can work and should work with. Not bad, not good, but something that one.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, now I'd like to actually, yeah, our panel, but just briefly, Olena already explained why she didn't vote. Andreas, how about you? What do you think?
I'm more skeptical. I also hope that perhaps there could be a positive turn, but the signals that we've got from Trump so far are ambivalent to say the least. And that's, of course, this ambivalence is not something currently good. One needs clarity, and there's certainly more clarity on the side of the Democrats currently. But who knows? Maybe it will not be as bad as I now imagine.
Sebastian, you also seem to be skeptical.
I am. I'm first of all baffled that we have this election result, but I'm not an expert on US politics, so maybe it's just so surprising for us here in Europe. And, it was much more different in the US. I believe that the second Trump term will bad in many aspects, and I'm afraid that Ukraine will of these aspects, and therefore I'm quite skeptical. Yeah, I think this would be a good development for any of us.
Thank you. Dimitro, how about you? What do you think? Is it good news? Is it bad news for Ukraine? Do you prefer not to assess it at the moment?
I think this is just a news. This is not bad and not good. This is situation that we have a new American president, and we must cooperate with this American president and looking forward to cooperation with this president. Thank you.
Very, very good diplomatic answer. Let me stay with you and ask the next question at you, because as already also mentioned, Volodymyr Zelensky congratulated Donald Trump on Twitter before the results were even officially confirmed. And he wrote that he appreciated Trump's commitment to the peace through strength approach in global affairs. But this is exactly the principle that can practically bring just peace in Ukraine closer. Is it a shared sentiment among the political elites in Ukraine? And
I think we have no choice. Our society has different expectation of the US elections, but the vast majority of Ukrainians want the war to end on favorable terms for Ukraine. Ideally, the liberation of all our territories occupied by Russia since 2014 to Ukrainian borders at 1991. Previously, both candidates made different statements about Ukraine. Kamala Harris' moderate statements contrasted sharply with those of Donald Trump. Donald Trump's statements about ending the war is in 24 hours look unrealistic as the common election campaign statements. For some time in my bubble, there was a whispered belief that election of Donald Trump would lead to decrease in support for Ukraine, and thus force us to enter in unfavorable negotiation with Russia. However, we will see Donald Trump real moves in the future. I am convinced that we have a plan that provides for scenarios of cooperation with whoever wins the US elections. The US support is very important to Ukraine, and many our MPs made already has made the statements about these elections. I can cite some of them if you want later. Thank you for long speech.
thank you, Dimitro. Olena, let me turn to you. Do you think that Ukraine can now rely on the US as it could have until now. Could you maybe briefly explain to us the structure and nature of the US support until now? It was also mentioned that the US was the #1 supporter in many terms. And also, what are the expectations of Ukrainians right now at the US and the new administration?
So, Malvina, thank you for the question as well as for the invitation. And what is much more important for organizing this event about Ukraine with Ukrainians, that's very indeed important. Sebastian and the chairman who is already not with us. Just a very brief statement. I was represented like Ukrainian expert, but I will talk from my personal perspective, not reflecting on official position or position of the institution I'm affiliated with currently. When it comes to the elections, is it and your question, is it good or bad for Ukraine? I would say that Ukraine did not make a bid on Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Ukraine has always tried to support bipartisan support to Ukraine. And you remember the last visit of President Zelensky to Washington. He tried to meet both with President Biden and with now President-elect Donald Trump to explain positions of Ukraine and to represent the peace plan just for both administrations to have an idea of what Ukraine expects. In terms of predictability of both candidates to Ukraine, it is kind of a trivial idea that Kamala Harris was much more predictable than Trump was. I have some kind of skeptical idea about this because me being from academia, I have traced such a trend during recent weeks, which come from think tanks who work closely with Democrats. I mean, Marshall Fund or Council on Foreign Relations. And the ideas which they reflect, they are very often overlap with what Republican representatives state. These ideas are mainly about, well, okay, we have come to some certain red lines when we have deficit. I mean, the West has deficit with delivering of weapons to Ukraine. We need some pause. We need to put the war on hold and to proceed later when we make Ukraine stronger, make Ukraine more resilient, when some changes in Russia are taking place. And just after this, we are coming to reconciliation. So this trend, this kind of thought-provoking and makes us think about what could be the presidency of Kamala Harris as well. When it comes to Trump, all of us know he is very much pragmatic. He is very much about protectionism. He is very much about isolationism. He's quite impulsive, emotional guy, and the communication with him requires some kind of business style pattern. This means that Ukraine will have to find this business style model, and we'll have to find some points of connection where Ukrainian interests might coincide with new administration, which will come to the Oval Office in January. Here, I would say that we also should not personalize too much US foreign policy, because yes, Donald Trump will be a crucial person in this regard. Still, we still do not know who will be his team. Because unlike Kamala Harris, where we could expect some two crucial persons to influence decision-making, in Trump's team, we have several divergent tracks. Starting with extreme isolationists to interventionalists, and still he has not named who will be his Secretary of State, who will be his Minister of Defense, who will be his main security advisor. Maybe during this, it is very dynamic, and maybe during these hours something has changed, but so far As I know, they are not, but we are hoping that those people whom we can name as candidates, the majority of them are very much supportive to Ukraine. Just a few of them voted against aid to Ukraine and might have more skeptical approach here. If we talk about expectations of Ukrainian people, that's of course about just peace. But this idea of just peace ideally implies coming to the borders of 1991 territory and making Ukraine resilient enough not to allow Russia in the future. That's the ideal situation. This ideal situation somehow comes in confrontation with those capabilities Western countries face nowadays. So this presents a huge challenge for Ukraine as well as for a newly elected administration to find this common ground. Sorry if it was long.
No, this was fine, right on time. Andreas, we heard in the opening remarks that supporting Ukraine is not a matter of charity. Nevertheless, Donald Trump has said very many times as elected president, and he will end the war in a day. If you had a hypothetical chance to talk to Donald Trump in the upcoming weeks, what would you advise him about, this approach about ending the war? And as Elena mentioned, just peace, how would you convince him that this is the peace that he should be aiming at? And how him understand that a just peace is not only, being benevolent to Ukraine, but also it lies in the US interest?
Well, with a video of an interview that he gave in 1999 to Meet the Press, that was long before he became a politician, and where he said, quote, "We can talk about the economy, we can talk about social security. The biggest problem is nuclear proliferation." End of quote. So that is on that 9, and I think that's indeed not just the biggest problem of the world, but it's also the biggest problem in a way for the US of this war, because the real scandal of this war, there are other wars, there have been other wars since 1945, is that Russia's thinking about the war, China's thinking about the war, the Ukrainians thinking about the war is very much shaped by the fact that Russia has nuclear weapons and Ukraine does not have nuclear weapons. And the scandalous thing about this is that Russia is officially allowed to have nuclear weapons, according to the nation. And Ukraine has entered also the nuclear treaty in the 1990s, and Ukraine is forbidden to have nuclear weapons. It's an official non-nuclear weapon state, whereas Russia is, as the successor country of the Soviet Union, an official nuclear weapon state. And so it turns out that this one of the largest treaty and maybe one of the most important treaties of once created and set up by the US, the UK, and the Soviet Union to preserve peace in the world, and it's a part of international law, is now actually an instrument for military expansion, because Russia is benefiting that it can have nuclear weapons. Ukraine is not allowed to have nuclear weapons, and as most of you are, this is of course that Ukraine had nuclear weapons after the breakup of the Soviet Union and agreed to give them away in exchange for this now infamous Budapest Memorandum, which is an annex to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and where Russia gave in English language the assurance in in Ukrainian and Russian language the guarantee that it would not pressure Ukraine, that it would not attack Ukraine. And so this is an even more egregious violation of the whole idea and the whole logic of this non-proliferation regime. And if Russia has already shaken the non-proliferation regime with that, because it's sort of suggesting to other countries that they may be as smart, so to say, as the Russians and try to get nuclear weapons, and they should be not as, in quotation marks, as stupid as the Ukrainians and not have nuclear weapons. And this is already now a big problem, that Russia is using this, not only this particular aspect of international law, but also its seat in the Security Council and its veto right in the Security Council, that is basically unbreaking the whole post-World War II international order. And for that reason, there needs to be achieved a just peace, not an illiberal peace, not some sort of victory peace, or as we say in German, Siegfrieden for Russia, but it has to be a full restoration of the territorial integrity, and there have to be reparations. The prisoners have to return, the deported children have to return in order to preserve this non-proliferation regime, because otherwise it will appear as that what you really need is nuclear weapons to preserve your national sovereignty, your territorial integrity. You cannot rely on international law, on international organizations, on international solidarity. You really need the bomb to protect yourself. And this is now, even as Dmytro already mentioned, and from the embassy was mentioned, that is even now even more becoming even more bizarre, in that North Korea, as a country that has left the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was once a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and has now presumably a nuclear capacity, has also entered this war, not just with delivering ammunition to Russia, but also now sending troops. So it becomes ever more bizarre. So in China, as another official nuclear weapon state, is supporting Russia. Iran, which is also supporting Russia, is suspected to be developing or to be planning to develop nuclear weapons. So this is all becoming a test case, so to say, for the non-proliferation regime, and that is something that the US should care about, because it concerns, at the end of the day, if nuclear weapons proliferate in the world, if many countries around the world will conclude that what you really need is weapons of mass destruction to protect your country, and you cannot rely on the UN and on other international organizations, then this is bad for the US and for ordinary US citizens. There are some other aspects as well, of course, but let's leave it at that.
I hope that you can pass your message somehow to the White House in the future. It's all being recorded. Sebastian, let me turn to you. In the title of this event, we have EU enlargement. And I guess that some of you might have been puzzled why and what has the US to do with the EU enlargement. So could you explain to us why and how would the Trump administration have impact on European enlargement?
Well, yes. So the major challenge that I see here is when we talk about EU enlargement and the application of the whole acquis, we also would have to apply Article 42.7, which means that if there is an attack on one EU member country, the others have to, respecting the neutrality of some of the EU members, but EU member countries have to use all the means at their disposal to help the attacked country. And if whatever scenario we foresee and things that are discussed for Ukraine, that we have some sort of frozen conflict, that we have some sort of whatever, the Siegfrieden that Andreas mentioned, whatever that would look like, I would believe that in the foreseeable future, what we have to deal with is instability in the region, meaning that the Russian Federation, if they are not fulfilling their goals of their what they still call their special military operation, they will just use the time when there is some sort of freezing of a conflict, which is something that Donald Trump intends to do, because otherwise, how would you be able to quickly stop that war? Would mean that sooner or later there will be another attempt to attack Ukraine, and there will be another aggression against the Ukrainian people. And if we have additionally to that a situation that Donald Trump will also not fulfill the promises given under Article 5 of NATO, then I am afraid that at the current situation, none of the EU member countries will be able to uphold Article 42.7 of the Lisbon Treaty. And therefore, my biggest concern here is that I could see a situation during the Trump presidency where Russia is, they most likely are not going to maybe attack a NATO member country directly, but rather have this creeping incursion and then maybe carve out something in the Baltics and then see, okay, is this now an Article 5 test case? And if that then leads to the situation that Donald Trump says, well, we're not going to start nuclear war over some land in Lithuania or Latvia or whatever, Poland, then NATO will practically be dead. And then we don't need to talk about European integration, because this will be the end of the final part of a European existing security architecture that is absolutely necessary to secure not only EU member states, but the whole continent.
A follow-up question: do you think that Trump administration could have also impacted the way that European Union supports Ukraine?
Well, certainly there are obviously some countries that couldn't wait to immediately congratulate him, or not countries, but politicians. And you could see here, for instance, that of course Viktor Orban is very happy that happened, but also politicians, for instance, in Germany, from the AfD, a lot of far-right parties that would be part of the fraction of these patriots for Europe in the European Parliament are very happy. They're having a field day and couldn't be happier. Which of course also means that this has a direct implication for the European Union and European integration, because the open goal of this fraction is to, I mean, it's no longer destroying Europe from within. They phrase it a bit nicer, but ultimately what they are trying to achieve through their policies is the end of European integration. And therefore, of course, yes, that also has implications on the
Just a few words on this. I mentioned that Trump is pretty much pragmatic guy, and he's during his first presidency, and now he's talking about burden sharing with Europe. And he actually might include in his dialogues with Scholz or Macron the idea that, well, okay, include Ukraine as a member and take care of it. And he's one of his potential candidates for the post of Secretary of State, O'Brien. He writes in his article that if Europe wants to show that it defends Ukraine, that it cares Ukraine, then please take it as your member. And it means that this would be kind of burden sharing, financial and military, between the United States and European Union, though how might sound.
Very comment. I mean, we're at the end of the first round. Would you like to comment on each other's responses? Because yes, that's your moment.
If I may, I would just add to this. Yeah, he might be very pragmatic, and there might be windows of opportunity for certain things, but the absolute uncertainty that results from his erraticness, and the challenge that I see is he will use his second term to make sure that this time certain things are not blocking possibilities for him. He has the possibility to not only fill the top positions, he might also have the possibility to fill 2 more seats in the Constitutional Court, but he has the possibility to really exchange the civil servants to a certain extent, and there will be people implementing whatever he is aiming at, and you would be at the mercy of whatever mood he probably wakes up, and this is something that I would consider very, very dangerous and unstable with this regard. But yeah, and apart from that, I mean, you can't take care of Ukraine.
I mean, that might be his approach.
And then nobody has won.
Dmytro?
Thank you. I think perhaps we are so afraid of Putin that we do not see the benefits that Trump's election could bring to us. Trump will force the EU to go where it's scary, to become more subjective for EU. Some like to make a new decision, to see some new possibilities, to make Europe better and stronger in this time. I think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. To make Europe stronger. This brings me to a question that I would again like to ask at our audience. Do you think that the EU is actually relying or has been relying too much on the US, especially when it comes to security? Who agrees? I see very many hands. I don't know about the chat. Oh, and Dmytro as well. Who disagrees? I see half of a hand. Sorry. Okay, so most of you agrees that the EU is relying too much on the US. How about our experts?
Actually, today, Macron and Scholz had a conversation after which they came and mentioned that, well, we need strategic awakening. That's actually kind of proof that probably this is why all of us raised our hands.
Okay, Sebastian, Dmytro, would you like to add something to what Helena has just said?
I don't know how many wake-up calls we need, what a slumber we are. The latest was in 2016. I can't read anymore what strategic autonomy we need to achieve. Are we going to achieve strategic autonomy with the vast differences of head of governments that we have in the European Union? Will we achieve strategic autonomy with the proposed commission that will be sworn in very soon? I am, as the former foreign minister of Germany said once in the Security Council, I'm not convinced.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the West European states have been partly free riders in terms of security through NATO, and they benefited a lot from that, and that has even had, I would say, negative psychological repercussions, because as I see it in Germany, there are many people in Germany who strongly believe that the reason that Germany is at peace now is because the Germans are so peaceful. And because the Germans are so peaceful, they have peace. And if we are only peaceful and are not aggressive, then we will be fine. You know, and that is, I think, this sort of this living in the sort of la-la land, and not simply not understanding how world politics functions, and there's a lot of anti-Americanism also connected to that, and maybe in that way Trump's election will be actually a good shock therapy, so to say, at least for some people.
Dmytro, would you like to comment on that?
I agree with the comments and with speech. It's very clear understanding that all of our audience have a good way of thinking of this situation. Trump will guide it exclusively by the interest of the United States, as he understands them. So we will have to provide to him that it is in the interest of United States to continue support of Europe or Ukraine, and support in other European initiatives like Green Deal, or in other good things for the whole world. But today we need understand that in what way we can be interesting for the United States, and also we need to understand we must be ourselves very strong to propose some good deal for the United States. For the Trump, he's very pragmatic in his statements. All for the United States, there are tariffs like a best way to regulation international relations, or other themes of Donald Trump, as his statements, they are in the same way. Make America big, bigger. That's why I think this is a great shock therapy for EU, for whole the world, that Trump had a second term in his presidency, and I think we managed that, and cooperate with this United States and in other United States in different situations. Thank you.
Let's see how it goes now in the next 4 years.
Maybe I was clear enough, because sorry for my not clear English.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you. Let's start the second round then. Sebastian, you were already mentioning that Viktor Orban was very quick to congratulate. There were many very right-wing parties, populist parties, far-right parties, quite happy about the victory, seeing it as a promise or potential for them to win in the next elections. The question is nevertheless, can we get there? And then do you think that, in your opinion, there is a possibility of returning, to business as usual with Russia, of normalizing relations with Russia now when Trump is back or will be back in the White House? Because there is this crumbling in the EU. There are more and more parties that are winning elections that can be actually seen as allies, or like to see themselves as allies of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, with a different Russia, this is possible, but not with the current Russia, obviously. And there are these. It sounds better in German than in English. That there are these ideas that you have a neutral Finland, and you could make Ukraine into a neutral Finland, or you can make Ukraine. You can use the German model for. Post-war model for Ukraine, of a divided Germany. Let's have a divided. Ukraine as well, and then and then wait until for a different time. But the problem here with Russia is that for Russia, Ukraine is not Finland and it's not Germany. For Russia, Ukraine is Russia, and that's and all these ideas that you take out of other contexts or from other periods, they are simply not applicable. And I've studied Russian ultranationalism for now 35 years, and it's an obsession with Ukraine, and many Ukrainians don't want to live under Russian rule, and they would flee. And then, for instance, I mean, that's another issue that I have. It's not just the free rider sort of strange approach, and this belief in that if you are peaceful, then the others will be peaceful as well. But there's also a simple non-acknowledgement of the immediate challenges that Ukraine poses to Europe rather than to the US because of the geographic proximity. So also another, I think, psychological issue is here that many think that Ukraine is on another planet, and that we shouldn't get, we are on a good planet, Ukraine is on a bad planet, and we should not get on this bad planet. And but what happens if you have a business as usual with Russia, that would probably be some sort of you would have to satisfy Russian demands with regard to Ukraine because they are so prevalent, so obsessive. And then what do you do then if you have, let's say, another 10 million refugees from Ukraine? So and who's going to take them? Just as a practical, even if you're extremely cynical and you say we are not interested in European values, international law, human rights is not for us. But how do you solve that practically? If you have another stream of refugees. So and the odd thing here is also that we would have the capacity. I mean, the Americans are saying, why are 350 million Americans taking care of the security of 450 million Europeans? We can mobilize a lot of money, as we did with the COVID crisis, with the Greek crisis, with the energy crisis. We can do that, but we think it's just it's not our Ukraine is somewhere on a different planet, and then we give it to Russia, and then we can sort of forget it. But it's so we will have to take care of this, and as Bastian mentions, we will also have to see what happens to actually the member countries on the east. As I like to mention, the most Russian city outside Russia is not, as many think, Sevastopol, but if you look at the demographic data, the most Russian city outside Russia is Narva in Estonia. If Putin feels encouraged and if you accept this Putinist narrative about Russian speakers in Ukraine, then you should perhaps also accept the Putin narrative about Narva, and then we are at the end of the EU, the NATO. If these things are then also sacrificed for some sort of business as usual with Russia, then we are simply losing our own sort of integrity as a European Union, as a Western alliance, as a security alliance. So it's all much more dramatic than I think many imagine. They think there's still many who think we can simply return to the pre-2014 world, and I don't think that's possible anymore.
You mentioned that some suggest Finlandization of Ukraine, or neutral Finland, but actually Finland is not even neutral anymore after what Russia has been doing in Ukraine. And
they were not very. I've talked to Finns. They were not very happy about this. Finns were not very happy about Finlandization. It wasn't imposed on them. They had no other choice. It was not a happy period of Finnish history, as far as I understand. At least those Finns I've talked about, and at the end they ended this situation. But anyway, I don't think it's comparable, because Finland is actually like the Baltic countries, it's something that most Russians would accept as foreign, but with Ukraine, I think the virulence is much higher, and now also many of the East Ukrainians and South Ukrainians who used to have a sort of ambivalent approach to Russia, they are now clearly anti-Russian, even more anti-Russian than in a way than. I live in Kiev. That's why I'm talking so freely about this, because of the experience they have every day with bombing. So, and they will either, I think they will flee simply if Russia, if sort of Ukraine is occupied, and they will simply go away. They don't want to live in that Russia.
Olena, coming back to the U.S.-Ukraine relations under President Trump in the future, what challenges do you think might be emerging, and what topics might be central in the dialogue between the U.S. and Ukraine?
Thanks a lot, Marina, for the question. I have to say, we in Ukraine now live with very, very short-term perspectives and planning something into very, very short-term perspectives. So I will just comment on some plans and challenges for the upcoming months. And I have to say that from my perspective, the most vulnerable period now for Ukrainian president and authorities are these 2 months before Trump becomes a full-fledged president and possesses the chair in the Oval Office. Presumably, Russia will do its best to advance at the at the front line during these months. And the major challenge for the authorities of Ukraine will be to lead dialogue with the Biden administration and with the newly elected president to help it as soon as possible. There is this package, the last package which was voted in the Congress of $61 billion, and still Ukraine received just minor money from that. So potentially there is a way to do that. And this will, at least for both sides, help to proceed further on to the next step, whatever it is. Some other thing where, as I mentioned in the beginning, Ukraine and US has to find some common ground. I think that this might be a sanctions issue. Because Donald Trump, well, okay, he is very emotional. Still, he will be challenged by a team. He will be challenged by some institutional inertia. His presidency has been thoroughly prepared by Heritage Foundation. You know, this mandate for leadership, which was drafted in 2023, and they challenged Trump with the mission, which he has to accomplish, to unite conservative electorate. Sanctions issue is something which is supported by the whole spectrum of Trump's electorate. MAGA electorate and non-MAGA electorate. That's when it comes about non-MAGA electorate, that's even more than sanctions. 53%, according to Chicago Council on Foreign Affairs, support US military aid to Ukraine. And presumably, Trump will work on this unification of the whole electorate, so sanctions, and first of all, dealing with the shadow fleet, which allows Russia to get the revenues for selling energy, which it efficiently conducts. This might be one of the first issues, and hopefully this might be useful for Trump. We know that already today he mentioned that he might influence Russia with the prices on oil, and Russia cannot efficiently wage war when prices on oil are lower than $40. I assume there are some modifications, but from Trump's perspective, this is this number. So sanctions is something where both parties can start with. And of course, this initial help with air defense systems with air power, which is Ukraine nowadays is heavily needing, armored vehicles and lots of other ammunition things, components. So these two issues, from my perspective, will be most important in this initial stage during these several months.
Thank you. Dimitra, Olena already spoke a little bit about mitigation, but what do you think? What strategies can Ukraine consider to maintain its stability in the upcoming months, as we talk about short-term perspectives, and what it could do together with the EU in order to maintain the stability?
I think there are many ways to get some stability, but our enemy, like Russia, it modernized the strategies of attacks. Exactly at this moment, there are some drone attack to Ukraine. We last month we have maybe. Russian sent to Ukraine maybe 4,300 drones from maybe autumn. All days we have some attack. This situation can't be so stable without any support for Ukraine. And when we have some stops of help from United States or from EU, we have increase some level of increase our problems in a battlefield in other areas. In this way, I think we need to show our partners in the EU that defense of Ukraine is important for EU. It's important in in the situation what we defense today we defense the EU from Russian influence. I think that European politics understand this, and when we talk with other with European politics, we know that they understand the situation and told about some help and some support for Ukraine, but it doesn't enough without United States. In this situation, when Trump decided to stop some help for Ukraine, it maybe increase European help, European support to Ukraine. But in this situation, we pragmatically think about situation that if American not provide they support enough for Ukraine. That's why maybe they arm business, arm industry come to Ukraine and made the arms in Ukraine, like Rheinmetall do, like Turkish company do in Ukraine. We can made this thing in Ukraine. And actually, in this situation, our Ukrainian defense industry and arms industry looks like more relevant to situation of the war of this war and this situation what we have with Russia, and maybe the same situation could be in other countries, and we have more experience. This may be the main point of that we are very maybe this main strategy for Ukraine to provide and to show the European partners and the United States that how we can be effective and that we need for Europe to defend Europe and United States interest in this area. I think that we need more support and our diplomacy corps work all day for this in different countries in different areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dmytro. Sebastian, what do you think about it? And if you had a chance to talk to European leaders, I mean, you know that Andreas was hypothetically advising Donald Trump, but if you had a chance to talk to European leaders, what would you advise them on with regards to Ukraine, especially if, as Dmytro mentioned, it would happen that the support from Ukraine is halted or limited?
Well, I mean, the first and foremost thing is that I think most of them have understood, but I don't know why they are not following through with the necessary consequences, that our values, our democracy, our freedom is under attack. And if Ukraine loses, we will all sooner or later lose. And I don't understand how this is not a thing. And this is why, I mean, Donald Trump is a certain phenomenon, and Donald Trump might be not everything with Kamala Harris would have been rosy, and not everything is going to be terrible with Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is a factor that is also challenging certain values. And our values are now under attack from both the Russian Federation in Ukraine, but at the same time also values like democracy, rule of law, and all the things that especially the European Union praises itself for are under attack, and we are not having the right conclusions out of this and not doing enough to actually defend that. And this is something that I really can't understand, because it's with things like environmental protection. It would be the same thing. Even if all the 98, 99% climate academics would be wrong, and there is no such drastic consequences. If we protect the climate, the result is better air, better water, better whatever. And this is not something that we should actually fight against. And if we see that these values are under attack, that our democracy and our freedom is under attack, why are we waiting for some external factor, some wake-up call if Trump comes or whatsoever? Why have we not done enough to protect first and foremost Ukraine? And by this, again, even if we then realize, oh, it's not that bad, it would not have been that's terrible what Putin or whoever is planning, we would have defended our values. We would have saved the independence of a European country. Why do we need an external shock to act and then do the bare minimum in order to react, instead of just doing what's logical, what's necessary, what's right?
Say that our values are under attack, but then I think even about the cases of disinformation, sabotage. So in a way, in many various ways, we are already, even in the European countries, under attack. And there's a clear action actor behind it, and it's like there's Russia.
The problem, too, is that I think Moscow understands that, and they they also, I would, you know, I can mainly reflect on what I see in Germany. There is a sort of a general sympathy among most Germans, not all, for Ukraine, but when it comes then to actually invest in it and to take risks, then it becomes tricky. Yeah, there's this debate about the Taurus cruise missiles, and many Germans, and that is a success that Moscow has achieved. They believe that if Germany delivers these Taurus missiles to Ukraine, Germany will be drawn into the war. And that will be maybe then a nuclear war, World War III, something like that. And Moscow plays with that. And then it becomes a sort of, you know, yes, we were sympathetic, but then we also don't want to take this risk. And then becomes actually, to me, quite logical that there is this hesitant sport, because people have forgotten how we lived in the Cold War, that there were actually many more nuclear weapons back, nuclear warheads back then. The risk was much higher, and now they got used to this sort of peaceful situation, and they are threatened and scared on purpose by Russia, and it works. Unfortunately, it works. Yeah.
I have many more questions to you. Olena, would you like to add something? Sorry.
Just maybe reflecting what Sebastian was talking and what Andreas mentioned at the beginning of this round. This neutrality issue, which is again returning in political discourse in Western European capitals, and that might presumably be in the dialogue with Trump. Again, it was from Ukrainian perspective, we thought that so much has been told about this unacceptability of this and rationality of this model to Ukraine, but it seems like our diplomacy still needs to do more, and our chancellors here, we are in Austria, which is neutral, just explaining that it would not work for Ukraine. Really some out-of-box thinking is needed, because this case is unique. We should not apply patterns which worked with other countries, divided countries during Cold War, Finlandization, Austrian neutrality, Ireland neutrality, I don't know what else. Each of them has their unique features, but none of them hasn't been a donor of strategic resources for Russia. None of them had Russia as an immediate neighbor. Ukraine is really culturally, civilizationally, politically, in terms of legacy of all these dimensions is a donor of strategic resources for Russia. This is why all these patterns do not work. And Ukraine has even tested this neutrality. Okay, not neutrality, it was non-alignment status from 2010 to 2014, which ended up with Russia's invasion and annexation, illegal attempt to annex Crimea. So this is important for in this dialogue, which we lead and politicians lead and diplomats lead on different levels in European capitals, to explain that this neutrality, it is just a manifestation of reluctance to do something. It is just a manifestation of desire to postpone something to some later times.
Thank you. I have more questions, but I would also like to give you a chance to ask yours. Are there any in the audience, or? Oh, I see 4. Great. Let's start right at the back, because I saw your hand first.
Thanks a lot. About Ukraine's NATO membership and the road to peace. I think it's the only way, logically. I campaigned since 15 years for that. And it's basically the Germans and many Europeans who are stopping that. My question would be now, do you see a momentum under President Trump, that he, who has actually brought 2 countries, Montenegro and North Macedonia, into NATO, might be somehow tempted by entering into history as the one who made peace by inviting and integrating Ukraine into NATO?
Sorry, you mentioned, please also tell us your name and affiliation if it's relevant.
My name is Günther Fehlinger-Jan, and I'm activist for NATO membership also in Austria, and here to support this as well. Sebastian, maybe for you the question. The momentum come.
Of course, know you, but we want the whole audience to know you. Yes, please. So at the back.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I would like to raise a question which may come on the table. quite soon after Trump takes power at the end of January. It may be that he really makes a deal with Putin, and Putin also is cunning, sufficiently cunning to give in to some extent, and then we have a deal at the expense and at the cost of the interests of Ukraine. So the question would be, if Trump exerts a lot of pressure, or in other words, blackmails Ukraine or Zelensky to accept those the loss of the territories already annexed by Russia. How should Ukraine react? How should Zelensky react? And how should the European Union react? I think this is the question which is very likely to come on the table. And very frankly, Putin and Trump, they share something much in common. The complete disrespect for international law and for law and order. And in that sense, I think it's all the questions about non-proliferation treaty and all the treaties. So for Trump, I think it's irrelevant. If he can, so to say, make a deal, make a point, get reputation, and so on, he will do it, ignoring any law. I'm very confident about it. And so this is the question: how we should react on such a move. And Putin really could make this towards Trump, and then expect something in return. And the problem is that it's very unlikely that in the package there is then a security guarantee for Ukraine or even a NATO membership for Ukraine. I would not really count on that. So Ukraine would be at the risk of future aggression by Russia 5 years on, and so on.
Thank you. If you allow, I will collect the questions. So, gentleman in the front, please tell us your name, affiliation, and.
So my name is Jun Saito, doctoral student at University of Vienna, and my research focus is Austrian security policy, European security, and sub-regional cooperation in Central and Southeast Europe. So my question is, sure that President Trump is unpredictable and are hot-tempered, but on the other hand, NATO as a whole and the United States has already prepared for a possible Trump administration. So in July, NATO established NATO security assistance and training for Ukraine, or all allies are pledged for annual $40 billion at least annually. So this is a framework for long-term support for Ukraine, and of course the United States and the Ukraine agreed to conclude the security agreement, including long-term military support and also support for reform for integration in NATO. Are ready for commitment of Trump administration to Ukraine. Thank you very much.
And one more question, Anton.
A comment, if I may. I was one of that who did not really support the idea that Trump is necessarily bad for Ukraine. And under Biden administration, first we thought that, and that was not only thought, but it was actually true, that the American support really helped Ukraine to not allow Putin to break Ukraine in spring 2022. But then it became very clear that Biden's administration did not allow Ukraine to win the war. That was the first thing. And now, actually, the Biden administration does not really help Ukraine not to lose the war, because currently Ukraine is losing the war, right? And it is losing the war of attrition, And if Kamala Harris just continued doing what Biden administration was doing, it would be just, the gradual loss of the war. So the Trump administration gives an opportunity, a potential. I'm not saying that it's going to happen. What we know about Trump, and I think this panel also and our discussion also proved that we actually don't know. We do know what the Biden administration, Harris administration, would bring to Ukraine. This is the gradual loss of the war. Now, it's very good that Zelensky congratulated Trump on the victory, and it's also very good that Putin did not. Putin and his presidential administration, they declined to congratulate Trump, saying that the US is still an unfriendly country. It's an adversary. So if Trump continues this idea or keeps on going on about this idea of the deal, any deal requires that two sides meet somewhere in between. And the Putin of today is not the Putin of when Trump was president. He's a very different person. What will happen very soon is that Trump will be briefed by the National Security Agency. He will be briefed by the CIA. He will know now what the Putin is today, right? So if he makes the deal to Putin, Putin will not accept. Putin is driven by the maximalist objectives in Ukraine. This is the destruction of the Ukrainian state. So he will not allow for the idea that meeting somewhere in between. And I think that Ukraine is actually prepared to step back from its maximalist objectives of winning the war by restoring all the borders of 1991. I think that Ukraine is prepared. I think the population of Ukraine is prepared to do that. Already 30% would agree that Ukraine will probably lose some territories. Already 30%, after 2.5 years of the full-scale invasion. So I think that Zelensky and Ukraine now in a better position than Russia if Trump does go with this idea of having a deal between these two countries.
Thank you for your comment, Anton. Who would like to start? Because I think all the questions were relevant for all of you, so feel free to address all of them. Also the comment by Anton. Who would like to start? Go ahead.
Okay, so I think the first two questions are a little bit connected, and Gunda, it's not going to happen. Yeah, Austria is not going to join NATO. Sorry, it's not going to happen. I know, but no. But what I think was an interesting point that you raised, and then also the gentleman after that, that Trump might be someone who wants to make a deal. And if that deal could be to bring Ukraine or whatever then is agreed upon would be the Ukrainian territory under NATO protection. The optimist that is in me, that is in the corner crying and in a ball of puddle of tears, might grasp at that straw. But I mean, the consequence, and you described then also what what a consequence necessarily would have to be of such a deal, and what would that then mean for each and every one of us. I think that goes in a direction where you say, okay, we accept that if you are strong enough and you are bullying enough and you have nuclear weapons and you can threaten, then you will get the possibility to annex, to rape, to kill, destroy, kidnap, etc. And I don't know if I want to live in this world order, and I see that this is the very challenge of Trump. The preparation for it, I think there have been some attempts. Not I think I know that there have been attempts to prepare for a Trump possible Trump return, but there's only so much you can prepare for if there is first this erraticness and uncertainty because you cannot plan with each and every possibility. And the second thing is what I also see, and here again, I see the very danger. Yes, it has ramifications for us, and especially also, I think, for Ukraine in the security field, but there's much more to that. Because I think what we have seen, Viktor Orban returning was then making sure that he will not lose again. There's other examples of authoritarian strongmen making sure that they cannot be voted out of office. I see tendencies also, for instance, in Slovakia. I'm afraid that if Herbert Kickl comes back into government, that he will make sure that he is not voted out of government. And I am very, very, very convinced that Donald Trump will make sure that he will not lose a next election or whatever he is connected to, because he is of course a natural end to it. And I'm not speaking about the American Constitution. And the last thing, the opportunity maybe that rises out of this answer. Yes, again, that tiny optimist crying in me would be so happy if this is actually something. But I rather see the and what you mentioned about the Biden administration is absolutely also disappointing in terms of what has been done here. But Olena mentioned the still tiny portion of the agreed 61 billion package that has only been delivered. There will be, first of all, now with Trump as president-elect, not anything coming in the upcoming month additionally to it, because it's usually the case that an outgoing administration does not grant anything anymore. And I see the very danger that even that in these months until what is it, January 20th or whatever the inauguration will be, they might even not uphold what they have already promised. And this is really something. How is Ukraine going to get through this winter? Because this is going to be the most devastating winter, because I also see that what you mentioned, Putin will now push more and more and more to exactly be in a better position to then make a deal with whatever Trump can make.
About the first question on the Montenegro, North Macedonia in NATO and real opportunity for Ukraine. Let me say that Montenegro and North Macedonia, about Montenegro more, North Macedonia less, that's very much a strategic issue for NATO. That's access to the sea in a certain extent. That's how Albania turned out to be in NATO. So for Ukraine, this lesson learned means that Ukraine has to show its strategic value for NATO. And this somehow connects us with the question of the gentleman from Vienna University, NATO security assistance for Ukraine and training Ukrainian militaries. This is something where Ukraine can come in the dialogue with Trump. Our potential qualitative capacity of our army is something from what NATO can contribute, can benefit, where we can contribute to NATO's joint security. So this is something what can be played with. Bilateral security agreement, also mentioned by the gentleman from Vienna University. Basically, this is a network of agreements which Ukraine has concluded with a variety of states, including United States, but there is a peculiarity with this document in US. That's an executive document which was signed by the president but not ratified by the Congress. It means that it doesn't have any, so to say, legally binding implications for Ukraine. Actually, they didn't allow Biden just to put it into the drawer, and we didn't see any implications for Ukraine so far. So that the question will be how Trump would interpret this document, how it would work with this. So we will see. And deal with Putin, the second question, at the extent of Ukraine. Well, okay, let us imagine that this happens and we have a way stronger Russia. And to a certain extent, it converts Russia from a junior partner of China to more or less equal partner. Is it something what Trump administration would be interested in when China is top priority for Trump administration and his team, whoever said anything or wrote anything? So China is top priority, and I heavily doubt that Trump administration would need Russia as a strong Chinese partner in this competition or contestation. Yes.
Yeah, just because most of the questions have already been answered. Once more on this NATO enlargement, I would be very much in favor of it, and better today than tomorrow. But I'm afraid also it's not gonna happen, or it's more likely that Austria is gonna enter NATO than Ukraine, because there are only two ways that this could happen: either against the will of Russia. And then I think, NATO is not a supranational organization. It's an intergovernmental organization. So you have 32 governments that have to agree to that. And my prediction would be that there will be always some governments that will be against Ukraine entering NATO against the will of Russia, perhaps during a war. We've just seen how many problems Sweden had with which one would have thought should have been an easy thing. And North Macedonia and Montenegro, I'm afraid, these were inconsequential enlargements. But if you do it against an agreement with Moscow, then it would imply that 32 countries would have to risk entering World War III for the sake of Ukraine. And there will be always some national governments who will not do that. That's my unfortunate, which I think it's bad. It should not be. The other thing is that to do it with the agreement of Russia, but that now we come to what Anton said. Will Russia ever agree? I mean, you could imagine a deal, that Ukraine gives away some territory, but then. And then you get the rump Ukraine will enter. That's the famous German model then. But will Russia agree to that? Will Russia, because Moscow would then obviously understand that this part, at least rump Ukraine, that the part that will be sort of then given to NATO, so to say, will never be Russia again. Yeah, so this I also don't see, at least as long as Putin is in power, happening. And there's also now the Russian constitution, which says that these 4 oblasts, not just Crimea, which is fully under Russian control, but none of the 4 mainland oblasts are fully under Russian control. According to Russian constitution, they should be. So how do you even solve that? This is also for even if Trump wants to make a deal, I think because of this constitutional change now, I don't see that it's much easier to change the constitution and add territory. It will be, even for Putin, much more difficult to again change the constitution and take away territory that is now actually under Russian constitutional law, part of Russia. So I don't think that will be easy for Putin. Putin is even.
But I did not mean that Putin is part of this, so is already under Russian constitutional order, so to say. No, he gets it. Trump exerts pressure on Zelensky to accept this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, no military support for Ukraine anymore. So blackmailing Zelensky.
But that would be very.
I think this is the most quite a likely scenario. And the question is, how should we prepare for this? What should we respond? We as a European Union, or how should Zelensky respond to such a blackmailing, which is not out of the cards?
But I think even for Trump, it would be quite embarrassing if, let's say, Ukraine would have to turn over Zaporizhia and Kherson to Russia in order to fulfill the Russian
They
constitution,
already control Zaporizhia and so on.
but not the city.
Yes, but that's what Trump would argue.
Yeah,
My understanding
but
was
that would be very
he would
embarrassing
like
if he would force Ukraine. I mean,
Yeah.
that's also something I can't imagine, frankly, that, you know, an American president would then make a deal in which an ally of America would turn over.
He saves Ukraine. The reminder of Ukraine is saved by Trump, and he sends himself.
And anyway, I don't think the Ukrainians would agree. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
that's the question now.
yeah,
how to-
yeah, that's the question. And that's what we then do. And, you know, I mean, there is this Ukrainian nationalist, national slogan, freedom or death. You know, it's either or. So I hope I'm not overinterpreting here. Now the Ukrainians should maybe say something on that. Sort of going here maybe far too way. But that, you know, but even for, I can't imagine an American president really. I mean, that would be so embarrassing.
Senator, what do you think? And please feel free also to make comments on what have been said and replay some of the questions.
Okay, just a few remarks. The constitution, the Russian constitution is not worth the paper it's written on. Actually, that the Russia are waging a war in Ukraine against NATO. That only good way to stop the Russians is powerful punch in the jaw. That's only a good way. This is the only way that Russia is used to talk. Apparently, it looks we are already a member of NATO, but no one has told us about it. So we do not ask to that implementation of the NATO treaty. That's like looks we defend all countries of NATO, but we still not in the NATO. Behind also about Ukrainian territories and about some ideas that and some thinking that Ukraine can lose some of the territories. I think behind the speakers, so audience can see the imagine of Ukraine with Crimea. There are Ukrainian with Crimea, and there used to be phrase when Russia first wanted to seize Crimea, known as a conflict over the island of Tuzla. We have some good phrase about this situation. This like Ukraine without Crimea is like the sky without the sun. And I will continue this line with Ukraine without Crimea is like the sky without the sun, like Europe without Ukraine, and like the US without democracy. Maybe this best answer for these questions.
Thank you very much. We ran a little bit out of time, so I won't throw any more questions at you. If we want to be a bit pessimistic, then it looks like the next month ahead of Ukraine may be very tough, as Russia may be trying to use the time before Trump is sworn in. On a positive note, if we want to look for this enthusiasm in us, it might be that the unpredictability of Trump may be still an advantage. We'll see. The IDM will for sure be observing the situation and analyzing it. So please follow us to be up to date. And I would like to finish today's event with an invitation to a glass of wine, which was provided by the Ukrainian embassy. And thank you very much for joining us here today. Good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay,